What to expect at Disney World during COVID-19. This is Go Inform Podcast, episode 53. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 53 of the Go Inform podcast. My name is Maven, and I am your hostess here on the show, and I am the founder and the blogger and wear all the hats at goinform.net, and thrilled to have you guys back with me again here on the podcast. Yay! Oh, I'm so excited to be doing this again, and I'm super thrilled that somebody else is listening. So thank you so much for being part of the show. You guys are awesome. Totally. So today's topic is what to expect at Disney World right now if you go during the COVID-19 era. And I do not know how long that's going to last, but it's looking like it's something we all are going to have to deal with for a while. So this topic, I think, is going to be useful for quite some time. And I also know that things are going to be changing as they have been. It's an evolving situation. So what I'm going to tell you today is what I know today. Well, I'm recording this here kind of beginning of October. Be sure to be watching the show notes for one thing, which are going to be over at goinform.net/53. Watch the Disney World official site. That's going to be your best information and most up to date on changes that are happening. And I'm also I've been really trying to, if anything's coming up that's changing or newsworthy, I'm posting it up on my Facebook page. So just kind of keep in mind that a podcast is a moment in time. But I do think that most of what I'm going to tell you about today is going to stay in place for quite some time. And one day, when we all get past all of this, we can listen to this as an archive of what it was like to go to Disney World in 2020. So, if nothing else, it's a little snapshot in time. What I want to do is talk to you about the things that have kind of a couple things. One is I want to talk to you about kind of the main things that we usually talk about here on the show that you need to be thinking about. And then the other thing is I want to tell you about the extra stuff that you need to know related to, going during COVID. And, basically they go together because I want to give you the big picture of what's changed, what you need to know right now, and then you can decide if it makes sense for you to visit and, what it might be like. So the first thing, of course, is safety protocols, just like everywhere, but probably even more extremely. Disney has implemented all kinds of safety protocols in the parks, in the hotels, really all over Disney property. So a lot of it's going to seem real familiar. You need to wear a mask all the time. You need to stay social distance from people. They are doing temperature checks to get into the parks. They've got hand sanitizer all over the place. They are social distancing people on the ride vehicles. So, you're probably going to have a much lower capacity on their rides because they're keeping people more farther apart. So just a lot of changes like that we've all kind of gotten used to actually now. And the best resource to find out about that kind of thing is the Disney World website. If you just go to their main official page, there's a big banner right on the top of the page that's going to take you to all those safety protocols. So if you're thinking about traveling, it's really important to understand what all these rules are, because one thing I can tell you about Disney is they have really been strict about enforcing everything. So know the rules and think about if you can, really live with them. I'll put a link to that website on my show notes too for this. So if you want to just click through for that, you can. One of the main rules that I want to talk about a little bit more in depth is that you are required to wear a mask pretty much anytime you're in the theme park, except when you're eating. And if you get something like a Coke or whatever that you want to have in the park, you are actually going to have to stop somewhere away from people to take off your mask to drink that Coke. So you cannot walk through the park and eat or drink at the Disney parks. You're going to have to, it's going to be kind of quarantined while you take your mask off, and then you can have your Coke or your ice cream or whatever it is, and then you can put your mask back on and walk. They're really, really being strict about this, so just important to know. They want you to keep your mask on pretty much all the time, whether you're at the hotel, whether you're waiting for the bus or on it. And so this is important because, first of all, if you go to Florida, a lot of times of the year, it's super, super hot. So it's not going to be super comfortable to be wearing a mask hours and hours during the day without a break. And if you're, unless you're in a job right now where you wear a mask all day, you really need to think about if that's going to work for you. There are a lot of tips for how to make it more comfortable and some things. One thing I would say is make sure you bring multiple masks for everybody in your group for each day, because if it gets really hot or you go on the Splash Mountain and it gets wet, or you get it dirty or something, you're going to want to have extras. So make sure you bring more than one mask for each day. You are required to keep it on the ride. And if you take your mask off and they take your picture, you don't get that picture, for one thing, and I'm sure you're probably going to get a stern talking to as well. So just make sure that you're bringing enough masks to be comfortable. You're bringing ones that are comfortable. In my last episode about Universal, in episode 51, I talked a little bit more about wearing masks and with some other tips. And there's a really good post that I linked to in the show notes for that one. And I will put it in this show notes as well. Because the other thing is we're all kind of wearing masks anyway in real life. And some of those tips are helpful just for your everyday life. So check out the show notes. I'll put that in there. Oh, yeah. And one other thing that's kind of fun is that if you want to support the show, over at tpublic.com, I have a Go Informed store over there, and it benefits the show. And I put a bunch of cool masks that are themed for like Disney and Universal and Harry Potter and stuff like that. So if you're looking for some fun everyday masks, or maybe for your trip, you can head over to goinformed.net/masks. And I'll link to that in the show notes too, and check it out because they're really fun and it does support the show. So thanks very much for that. It's goinformed.net/masks. Okay, so Disney World, some other tips. There are a lot of things Disney's doing that are the same as what Universal's doing, but there's some stuff that's different. And one of the big things that's different is that you need a reservation to get into the theme park. Just having a ticket is not enough. So you will need to get on Disney's site once you have purchased your tickets. You need to get on Disney's website and you need to tell them which park you want to go to on which day. So they want advance notice. They want you to have a reservation. It's good for the whole day. It's not a timed reservation, but it is for that day. And it is possible that the park you want to go to on a certain day could already have all the reservations taken. So as soon as you know you want to go on this trip, then you should make sure and buy your tickets and get on there and get your park reservation. Okay, so going hand in hand with this is Disney is not allowing you to park hop at this time. So you can only go to one park for any day of your ticket. So there are no park hopper tickets, and you're just going to do one park per day, and you need to pick the park ahead. So this is different from Universal. Universal is letting you go to the different parks on the same day, assuming that there's room for you in the park, and they are not requiring you to make a reservation. Disney wants the reservations. I think it's just a way for them to figure out, staffing and who's going where, and also to kind of spread the crowds out between the parks. Disney is limiting their capacity by a lot. They only have so much room, and they want you to know ahead of time if you're going to be able to get into the parks. So that's kind of a big thing to know. Number one is you need a reservation for a park. Number two, you can't go to more than one park per day. And the other thing to know about the individual parks is that the hours are shortened. So for the most part, every park is open for about 8 or 9 hours a day, and that's it. And the opening hour times are staggered between the different parks. So you might see that like Magic Kingdom is open from 9 to 6 or 7, and Epcot is open from noon to 8. So on different days of your stay, you're going to have different hours for the parks. And, like I was saying earlier, there's so many things that I've told you guys about that just don't really apply right now, like getting up early to get to the park. Well, if it opens at noon, you don't really have to get up that early. So be aware that park hours are shortened. The park hours are subject to change at the last minute. That's been happening also. There are no extra magic hours right now either. So you don't have that extra little kicker if you're staying in the hotel. One thing, though, an advantage to staying in the hotels is that related to the reservation for the parks, they are giving priority to guests in the hotels. They get first crack at the reservation spots for the individual parks. So that is actually a really good reason to stay on site, because you'll have less competition to get to do the park you want to do on the day you want, but no extra magic hours, so you aren't getting that. And along with those short hours, there's a lot of things that aren't happening. So there is no sit-down breakfast reservations right now in any of the parks. Again, that's another hack you can't use right now. But you can. Most of the parks are open for hours that include lunch and dinner, and you are going to want to get reservations for if you want to do any table service. You're going to want to get reservations because they are limiting capacity in the restaurants, of course. And so there's less space for people. Now, there's also less people in the park. So, it's going to be somewhat proportional, but still having a reservation is always advised. And I think I would actually advise it even more right now so that you have that spot in the restaurant if you want to go, have a nice table service meal. Oh, another thing related to dining is that there is no Disney dining plan right now. I have not talked about it much here on the show because it's not something that I personally have used. But Disney has historically had an option that you could add to your package that included meals. And so it's kind of like an all-inclusive kind of experience. And they have stopped that right now. So there is no Disney dining plan. It's all going to be pay as you go with the dining. Probably some of the reason for this is just that not all of the restaurants are open. So, they don't want people to prepay for meals and then not be able to use that credit. You will notice if you take a look into this that there's fewer character meals. They are actually still doing character meals, which is pretty amazing. And the way they're doing it is just kind of distancing the characters. So right now you're not going to get up close to Minnie or Mickey. You're going to see them from a little distance and be able to take like a distant selfie with them and interact with them. But it's not the same as, the traditionally where you would get to, meet the princess face to face. That is not a thing right now. But they are still doing some character meals. So if that's something that's really important to you, you can still do it. I believe they have lowered the price on some of them. So that's good. But it's, definitely a modified experience right now with that. In terms of making reservations for dining, Disney has changed this to 60 days in advance as the farthest you can book. So it was always 180 days out for dining reservations. Now it's only 60 days out. And this is something that I think is going to... I think this is useful right now because a lot of people aren't planning that far in advance for their travel, at least if you're going to be traveling in the next, even year, maybe. So you don't get penalized for not having been there 180 days in advance, to make your reservation. But it's a change that you need to know about. Used to be, you could, if there was something you really wanted, you could try to book it 6 months ahead, but not right now. They're also really encouraging people to use mobile order through the app for dining in terms of any kind of quick service in the parks, even in the hotels and at, I think, Disney Springs too. You can mobile order and avoid standing in line. You avoid that point-to-point personal contact with the cast members. And so they really want people to use this. So the app is very important in this era of COVID, and I'm sure it's going to stay like this. So make sure that if you go, that you have the app set up, you know how to use it, and you have your form of payment in there for mobile order because you're going to be using it a lot. They even now have some mobile order for takeout at a few. They're rolling this out at some of the table service restaurants at the hotels. So it's kind of a cool innovation, I think, and something I think is here to stay. So mobile ordering, just like in the real world, it's really taken off. So do know how to use the app and be aware that this is actually an excellent way to avoid lines and do something else instead of waiting in line for your, lunch. Okay, something else that is not happening that we have spent a lot of time talking about is FastPass. There are no fast passes right now, and there is no fast pass queue. Everybody is waiting in the regular standby line unless you have like a VIP tour or something. That'd be a fun topic for the future. Maybe we'll talk about VIP tours sometime that we're dreaming about Disney. But anyway, you are going to wait in line with everybody else. There is no way to avoid that unless you have like a disability or something like that, but no fast pass. So the nice thing about this is you don't have to plan, everything you're going to do, just like with the dining reservations being a little more flexible. You don't have to plan as far in advance. And the other thing that's happening before you're like, oh my gosh, how long are these lines? Because the park capacity is so low, the wait times actually have been fine. Unless you're there on like a holiday weekend, for the most part, it's been reasonable wait times. And you can get on the Disney app right now and see what the wait times are like for, your favorite attractions. And you'll probably be surprised. So there's no fast passes, so you can't avoid the standby line and you don't plan ahead. Now, you're only going to one park per day anyway, so that also cuts down on some of the planning. But it is a good idea too to have a strategy, because you can't use FastPass. So, think about what you want to be doing when. And those touring plans that I've talked about on my park audio tours, when I've talked about kind of like what you might want to do first, that still holds, because the most popular things are probably still the most popular. Also, touringplans.com, they are actively updating their advice on how to tour in the parks right now. So this is a really, really good resource for you if you are going to go. I always recommend them. I think their unofficial guidebooks are great. And I really think getting a like $15 a year or whatever subscription to their site is super worthwhile right now. So check them out. It's just touringplans.com. Again, I'll link to that in the show notes. But getting there early is still helpful. There's not really rope drop like before. They aren't going to crowd people up behind a rope. They are letting people into the park before official opening time and just kind of letting you spread out, and then opening the attractions, roughly around the time when it would have been rope drop anyway. So getting there early is good, because you will still beat crowds. Even when the park's only open for 8 or 9 hours, not everyone gets there right when it opens, which to me is crazy, because it's expensive to go to these parks for the day, for one thing, and you made the effort to get all the way to Orlando. If it's only open for 8 hours, try to be there for all 8 hours. And that's kind of a good tip, I would say, right now. So get there early. And the other thing is that the end of the day, reports are that the last hour of the day is also really, really quiet in the parks. So, there are a lot of reasons not to travel right now, and things that you can't do. And I'm going to talk a little more about that here in a minute at Disney World. But one thing you can do is be in a park with very few people. And if you are going to go, take advantage of that, because I think that's probably the most valuable reason to travel to Disney World right now, is to be in the park with very few people. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the things that aren't happening right now during the COVID-19 operations. Basically, things that draw a big crowd are not happening. Shows are, for the most part, not happening. Fireworks is not happening. So no fireworks, which is a big tradition in the Disney parks at the end of the day, and they are just not doing it right now. No big parades either. So the 3:00 parade at Magic Kingdom is not happening. So there's no parades. Now, these things are some people's highlights of their trip. And I know for some of you guys it is. And so you really need to think about is it still Disney Vacation without it? I don't like to stand in the crowds. So for me, it's actually kind of nice to not have to avoid the parade and the crowd after the fireworks. It just sort of depends on your perspective, but just know that those things aren't happening. I don't know when they're coming back. Now, Disney is doing something really cool because they don't have the parades. And another thing that they're not doing is the character meet and greets up close. That's not happening. So they're having the characters in the parks from a distance. So one thing that if you get on YouTube and you check out what's going on right now, you'll see that they have on top of the train station in the morning, they have all the characters up there waving to the guests coming in. So you still see the characters, but you can't get close to them. But what they've done, which is a really cool thing, because there's no parades, because they're not really interacting with the characters, they have done this thing they're calling character cavalcades. And what it is it's just like, it's kind of at random times. It's on the parade route. It's like they take one parade float with a character on it and they just drive it through the park. So this is basically a Magic Kingdom thing. You can just be walking around and all of a sudden a float goes by with Ariel on it, or, Mickey or whatever. And it's kind of fun because it seems a little more spontaneous and it's not like something you have to wait for. It just kind of happens in the park. And people who have been there are just actually really delighted by this. So I'm hoping that Disney keeps doing this because it's kind of nice. You don't have to wait like for a parade where you have to stake out a spot and sit there for an hour and whatever. You just get to see it going by and then you keep going on whatever you're doing. So that's something new that they're doing, but it's kind of replacing something that's been taken away. Now, all of the theme parks are open. Like I said, the water parks have been closed. Disney's saying, I think they're saying that they may open one of their water parks here in the fall. Oftentimes, the water parks are closed for refurbishment in the dead of winter time anyway. So water parks is something that may or may not be available here in the next few months. But right now it is closed. Not all of the hotels are open either. So if you have a favorite place to stay, or maybe you booked a trip into one of the hotels and it might be closed and you may not be able to stay there. So for people who have done that and have reservations, Disney is, gently prodding you to move into an alternative hotel. So limited options in terms of that, although plenty of options at all the different price points. So it's not like you're only going to be able to stay at, Contemporary or something. There are options. But, some of the most popular ones are closed and probably going to stay closed for a while, including the Polynesian, which they're saying they're doing a Moana themed renovation at, and that's going to be closed for like a year or something. And one of my favorites, Port Orleans French Quarter, has been closed, and I don't know when that's supposed to reopen. So just do know that you may not be able to stay in your first choice hotel if you do decide to visit. And this is, of course, all a factor of the limited capacity that they are operating under. And they have been really, really careful, I think, to not overbook people and not overcrowd the parks. So, it's one of these things where the good news is the parks aren't crowded and they're, keeping it safe. Bad news, though, they can't operate all the hotels when they only have that number of guests on site. And same goes with dining. A lot of the restaurants are closed right now because they just can't support it and staff it because there's not enough guests. So, some of the things it's not going to be it is not going to be a full experience. If you decide to go, it's going to be a little more of a surgical strike kind of thing where you're going to get to do specific things, but you're not going to have quite as much freedom to not as many choices to experience as usual. And I mean, we all know there's a million choices of things to do at Disney World, too many for even a local to ever experience. So even if they take half those things off the table, there's still a ton of stuff to do. So it's still giving people a experience of being at Disney and getting that theme park vacation, but it may not be exactly what you usually get to do or what you had pictured. One other thing I wanted to just touch on is transportation. So there are a ton of transportation options that Disney provides to guests on their property. And a lot of them are still, I think pretty much everything is still operating now, but they are really limiting the capacity. Like the monorail, if you've ever been in the monorail, there's sort of different compartments. They're just doing one party per compartment. I mean, this is actually kind of cool because like you aren't in there with a bunch of strangers. I'm sure you can get some really fun pictures, but it does mean that the capacity is really limited. So you may have to wait a while to get on the monorail because they're just not loading very many. The buses is the same kind of thing. They're definitely not filling the buses like before. I mean, I've been on a lot of buses where it's packed on crazy, like Tokyo in there. That's not happening now. So they're very, very small groups on the bus, and they've even put up plexiglass partitions inside the bus to kind of be able to keep people separate. So this, I think, is really smart and makes the buses still able to be operating safely. But, instead of having, 100 people on the bus, if they can only get 25, then you can, think, there's going to be times when you might have to wait for more than one bus before you can get on it. The Skyliner, though, is actually still a pretty good choice, I think, because the Skyliner moves pretty fast and continuously. And the individual gondolas, what they're doing is they're just putting one party per gondola, which in my experience is often how it is anyway. And they are still running that. So Skyliner, if you can stay in one of the hotels on the Skyliner route, that could be a really good option right now. I actually think it's a great option anyway. I talked about the Skyliner in one of the past episodes. If you want to find out more about it, check it out. So one thing that I would advise that's different than my usual advice is that you may want to rent a car. Or, I think a lot of people that are visiting right now are probably driving rather than flying into Florida. So you'd already have a car. But I think having your own car right now makes a lot of sense, because it gives you the flexibility to move around the property without having to wait, and also kind of stay in your own little bubble. So just know that if you have a car, you will be paying for parking at the hotel and at the parks and such. So you need to add that into your budget. Annual pass holders actually get free parking. It depends on the pass, I believe, but this is something you may want to look into also if you're going to stay for more than a couple days. It actually could make sense to get an annual pass for one person in your party, literally just for the parking. Annual pass holders also get a discount in the stores and at a lot of the restaurants. Do the math on that. I advise annual passes for Universal a lot of times. But Disney, it's been kind of one of these things where you really got to dive into the numbers, because you don't always get a discount at the hotels or anything extra. But if you've got to pay for parking and on top of the other discounts in the parks, one person having a pass can get you that free parking. So keep that in mind. And definitely think about having your own car at Disney World right now. As long as the transportation capacity is limited, I think it might be a good idea. So let's get to the question that most people are asking, and doesn't exactly have one answer. It definitely does not. And the question is, should you go to Disney World right now in 2020, or maybe even in the beginning of 2021? This is a question only you can answer for yourself. Obviously, the first consideration is going to be safety, safety of you, the people around you. What is your comfort level with traveling right now and traveling to Florida specifically? You need to look at a few factors. Of course, the first one is, do you feel comfortable going somewhere where you will be interacting with a lot of strangers? Even though it is very controlled, it's still going to be different than if you've mostly just been staying home and not doing very much. So there's a comfort level thing. I do believe that Disney is doing everything they can to keep people safe. I think that the way they are enforcing the rules is really, really good. And so far, fingers crossed, it seems to be a safe place to go. That said, you've got to decide on your own comfort level. The few other things to think about are, if you travel to Florida, will you have to quarantine when you get back? Actually, Florida even, I think this is still the case, and this stuff keeps changing, but they have rules if you're coming from certain states that you may have to quarantine when you get to Florida. So make sure you know what the rules are in terms of just interstate travel when you want to go. The downside of going to Disney World right now is basically that not everything is open. You may not get your first choice for where to stay or where to eat. So you do have a lot of limited experiences. If you're a first-time visitor, I would probably say it'd be better to wait, because you're just not going to get it's not going to be the same. If you have been there a bunch of times like me, or, you feel like you have only certain things you want to see and do, and those things still exist, then maybe you want to go. It is kind of interesting that right now, prices aren't especially discounted, and it's the same at Universal. You might think that they would be offering these really great deals to get people to come there. But I think because it's supply and demand, you guys. So I think that because they have such limited capacity, that they are able to, fill the hotels to the capacity they can, without discounting the prices more than they normally would. So unless you're a Florida resident, or they are offering some specials kind of regionally. But if you're traveling from outside of the Southeast, you're probably not going to see any extraordinary discounted rates on the park tickets or the hotels. And so you're paying the same price for that park ticket with a different level of experience. Honestly, though, if you like to just go and ride rides, now you're getting the most money out of that ticket you possibly can, because you can do everything just walking on pretty much. So that is the plus side. The parks are going to be virtually empty, and really, compared to your own neighborhood, this may feel the safest you've felt in a long time, because of the way that the cast members are requiring people to follow the rules. So there are some plus sides to going right now. And another thing is that you don't have to plan so far ahead. Disney World, and the reason why there's so many of us out here giving advice, is that there's a ton of planning that you need to do, and there's certain times you need to do certain things. And now you don't have to worry about fast passes. You can make your dining reservations 60 days ahead, not 6 months ahead. There's just a lot more sort of sense of being able to make a decision at the last minute. So that is also a nice thing. On the other hand, if you liked being able to have those fast passes, have those really far advanced dining reservations, you're not going to get that experience right now. So I do have some tips for you if you decide you want to go right now. The first one is just to temper your expectations. Everything is subject to change at any time. So the safety rules can change, the capacity can change, and these changes may or may not be what you would like. So you need to know that you just have to be really flexible, and you need to know that there might be some things you're not going to be able to do, even if last week it said you could. You've got to be ready to wear that mask basically all 24/7. So, just keep that in mind. I really recommend that staying on site is a good idea right now, because you're going to get priority for the park reservations, and you're going to stay in that Disney World safety bubble also. So, you're kind of going to get there and you're going to have your own cocoon of, where they're really making sure that people are doing the right thing to keep everyone safe. Another tip, and this is a huge one, is I really recommend that if you are planning a trip now or in the future, that a travel agent can help you so much right now, you guys. So that is basically the job that I was doing before COVID hit. And I can tell you that the people I work with, they went to extraordinary lengths to help their clients when stuff went sideways. And it is not easy dealing with Disney if they're getting a deluge of phone calls of people with problems and cancellations and stuff. And if you have a travel agent, it's their job to be on hold for the whole morning, waiting to get through to that wonderful guest services person on the other end of the phone. So working with a travel agent is going to be really, really valuable if you're traveling during COVID. It doesn't usually cost you anything to do that. Often they're going to find you a better deal than you would find on your own. And the service you're going to get, it's just going to make it so much easier. So find a travel agent. If you need a recommendation, send me a message and I'll connect you with someone. But that is definitely a top tip. And really, that's going to be a tip I'm going to give you guys going forward too, because I just think that a lot of us have learned in this whole past year of having things booked and then having to unbook them, that getting some assistance like that is extremely valuable. And if you're just booking it online through a third party, it's a lot harder when something goes wrong. So use a travel agent. Also, travel insurance is a really good idea. Travel insurance can help protect you if something does go wrong. Now, there's always going to be weird things that are excluded, like hurricane may not be covered, and sometimes even COVID's not covered. But look into it, because having your trip insured is another way to make sure that if you get sick when you're down there or something else happens and you're not able to travel, potentially you have some insurance covering your costs when you've laid out money for these trips. Disney is being really good about refunds. So that's super helpful. But again, that's where you get the travel agent involved to help you take care of that. So what if you don't go now and you are waiting and you're just wondering, like, when am I going to take my trip? I also have some tips for you. Basically, what I would say is there's a lot you can do right now to get ready so that when it is time for you to travel, you can just do it. One of the things is just start doing your research. Think about where you want to stay. This is fun. This is the magic carpet I talked about before on the last episode. Like, get on the magic carpet and take a little imaginary trip. You can even basically plan your trip. Just don't put your dates in there. So figure out where you think you want to stay, how many days you want to spend. Do you want to go to Universal also? What time of year would you want to go? Who would you go with? All of these things you can figure out now. And a Disney World trip is something that really does usually end up taking months of planning to really figure out what you want to do and then start implementing your plan. So what do you have now? You got time. So start thinking about all of that stuff and start putting together a trip. You can talk to a travel agent now and ask them for assistance. You can start just reading the unofficial guidebook and listening to my show and, my friends' shows and getting more information. But this is a really good time to start thinking about the trip. And then you can start getting ready for it. You can start saving your money, because these also aren't inexpensive, but I think very worth it kind of vacations. One of my favorite hacks that I'm working on right now is building up those credit card points. So, get yourself maybe you already have a credit card that gives you travel points that you can use. You can get a Disney credit card even, which will give you points you can use for a Disney trip. You can get a card that just gives you airline points or other kind of travel points. But if you're still buying stuff right now, right? So try to kind of boost what you're doing by getting some points that you can use for this trip. And then another thing you can do too is just get yourself ready for a vacation like this, because as I have said before, a trip to Disney World it's a physical exertion kind of thing. So it's sort of like training for a marathon. You will be on your feet a lot. You will walk miles and miles and miles every single day, and so will your family. So I bet you're already spending more time walking around your neighborhood. I know I am. So start using that as a way to train for your trip. And I have written a couple new posts over the summer, and one of them is about that exact thing. So I've got a post on the site that tells the walking distances for common things like the distance from the front gate at Magic Kingdom to the castle. And it's also Universal. So I've got the Universal parks and the Disney parks and a lot of those walking distances. So you can get a sense of how far you would walk on a regular day there. And so I'll link to that in the show notes. I even have a bingo card that you can download that has different walking distances on it. And then you can, when you go for your walk in your neighborhood, you just like X off the box. So it's like today you walked from the front of Epcot to the back, for example. So that is something you can do right now. Start getting yourself in shape. Start getting your family in shape. Start getting your financials ready, and start planning. And then you will be ready when the time is right and you can go. I know you guys can all go, so maybe we can meet there. It'd be amazing. Okay, and then a couple things you can do on terms of hanging out with me before you go is you can sign up for my mailing list. So I do have an email that I send out here and there with updates about the parks and anything new that's happening with the podcast and the website. So just head over to goinformed.net/newsletter, and that should get you onto the mailing list, or you can do it on my Facebook page. You'll see it. I'll put a link in the show notes too. Make sure you subscribe to the show also, and catch me and Joey and our friends on our Facebook live chats on Tuesdays over on the Disney Hack Facebook page. That's another fun thing you can be doing. Please let me know what questions you have about this topic with Disney World and COVID or anything else. I really like hearing from you. And again, Facebook, Instagram, great place to just send me a message. Hang in there, you guys. I've got a really fun show for you next time that's entertaining and informative, and something really funny that I think will help brighten your day. So anyway, keep an eye out for that. And when you get to travel and you go on this trip, I really hope you have a monumental vacation.